Again, I go back to the point when you're reading the Bible and you get to the chapters about the genealogies, the temptation is to just skip over the genealogy chapters and go on to the next big thing. And if you do that in the book of Genesis, you'll wind up skipping over Genesis 10 and 11, and you'll wind up in Genesis chapter 12 where you meet Abraham. And Abraham's a good man to meet in the scripture, but if you skip over Genesis 10 and 11, you miss out. Genealogies in the Bible are important. They either express the lineage of Jesus or they tell us where the kingdoms of the world came from. And you can get a good historical context about what's going on in the Middle East if you have an understanding of Bible genealogies. But if you don't have the stomach or the patience to study out Bible genealogies, if you do read them, sometimes you come across side notes and stories that illustrate things that happen in Scripture that have set up the modern world as we know it today. In the midst of the genealogies in Genesis chapter 10, we meet a man named Nimrod. Now, Nimrod was a mighty man. Verse 8 says he was a mighty one in the earth. That tells us he was a great military leader. Verse 9 in Genesis chapter 10 tells us he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. And Genesis chapter 10, it tells us that he founded a kingdom, a mighty kingdom, the kingdom of Babel. Nimrod's kingdom, the kingdom of Babel, the rise of that kingdom is recorded in verses 10 through 12 of Genesis chapter 10. The kingdom began at Babel and expanded to Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. Now you're saying, where is the land of Shinar? Look on your map, look on your globe, look on your world map, find Iraq. That's the land of Shinar. So basically, he built a kingdom that would be modern day Iraq, that would cover that area. This kingdom expanded out and built the city of Nineveh. You may remember the city of Nineveh as being the place where the prophet Jonah was sent to. And Jonah did not want to go to Nineveh. And Jonah, the book of Jonah had kind of a pathetic ending because Jonah so hated the Ninevites that he wanted God to condemn them even though they had repented. All that history of the Ninevites and Nineveh and what the people of Nineveh did, it goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 10 when that city was established by Nimrod's kingdom of Babel. Nimrod's kingdom took over what we know in history as the Fertile Crescent. That's the area of Iraq stretching over toward modern-day Syria and down into what we know as the Promised Land. His kingdom took over the most important piece of land in the world at that time because that was the most fertile land, and it was a land that would give a food supply, which was, today we fight over land that has oil. Back then they fought over land that would grow food. And so you have Nimrod, and he's establishing his kingdom and his kingdom of Babel, and he's a mighty man in the earth, a mighty hunter before the Lord, a great military leader, and he builds a mighty kingdom. And in that kingdom, Genesis chapter 11 records how that kingdom went about a project to build a tower that would reach into heaven. The Tower of Babel was built alongside the city of that Babel. As they were building the city of Babel, they decided to build the city and build a tower that would reach into heaven. Verse 4 says, go to, and this is chapter 11, Genesis chapter 11, verse 4, go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad the face of the whole earth. These people were building the tower to reach into heaven, and by doing so, they were challenging God's domain. The Bible also says they were looking to make a name for themselves. In verse 4 it says, let us make a name, lest we be scattered. They were looking to make a name for themselves. And so you've got a couple of problems here. One, they're challenging God's domain. Two, they're making a name for themselves. And three, by gathering there at the city of Babel and building the Tower of Babel, they were not replenishing the earth as God instructed. They were concentrating themselves in one place. And they were being prideful. God hates pride. The people were challenging God, and so he scattered them and confounded their language. Why do we have so many different languages in the world today? It all goes back to Genesis chapter 11 when God confounded the language of men to get them to scatter throughout the earth so that they would repopulate or replenish the earth. The people were rebelling against God. God put down that rebellion. Now, the thing to remember about the Tower of Babel in Genesis chapter 11 is that history repeats itself. And there will come a day in the end time. The Bible teaches that the kingdom of Babylon will rise again, and that there will be a call for a one world government, and the peoples of the world will unite behind one single leader, and they will rebel against God to the point that you will actually have military forces going to fight Christ when he returns at the end time. History will repeat itself in the end times. Don't be taken up in it. Don't be deceived. Don't join in that. Don't allow yourself to be fooled into fighting against God. But one of the big things that we learn in Genesis chapters 10 and 11 is the need for humility. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. Realize His greatness and His power, and worship Him for that, and trust Him for that. Humble yourself in the sight of the Lord. The Bible teaches if you humble yourself in the sight of the Lord, He'll lift you up. But interesting reading in Genesis chapter 10 and 11. The rise of Nimrod and his kingdom, then the rise and fall of the Tower of Babel. After you read about the Tower of Babel, there's another genealogy given there, which will lead you to a man named Abraham in Genesis chapter 12. And that's where the Bible journey will continue. Thank you, and God bless you.